Introducing Nose to Tail, a podcast where we explore the world of aviation lifecycle solutions, insights, and more. Presented by Jet Midwest.
Welcome back, everybody, to the Nose to Tail podcast. I'm Patrick Kraus, COO of Jet Midwest. I'm here with Todd from Block Aero. Todd, welcome.
Hi.
Todd, you've got an interesting business that you guys are in. I know our listeners are going to be excited to hear a little bit about where you've come from and where you're headed. So why don't you give us the basics of your origin story with Block Aero?
Sure. Well, I guess it goes back to the beginning of my career in the aerospace industry. So I'm an aerospace guy first. I didn't come in from the tech world and start this software company. I started out in a Florida-based family-owned distribution business. So what we would do is we would build and assemble things like switches, connectors, relays, and we'd sell them out to the airlines, MROs, all around the world. So my first job was actually in Asia to cover the APAC market for that company. It was called Wings Electro Sales. And while I was doing that, I got to get everybody's first kind of experience in terms of like what are the certification requirements for selling these kind of parts and materials to these companies. And I along the way of my career, I didn't just stay at Wings. I moved on to another company that I started called Aviatech, and there we didn't just trade consumables and expendables, but we got into rotables and APUs. And as I went through that journey in my career, I realized I always came back to the same pain points, which was always around the paperwork, the documentation, and the data, just like everybody else. So essentially, it was around 2016 that I joined this organization called Entrepreneurs Organization. So it's a global community of vetted entrepreneurs. And at that time, and I was in Shanghai at the moment, everybody was investing in or doing something related to blockchain and with crypto. And I was still in the aviation world, mainly thinking about my pain points, but all of those guys were saying, hey, Todd, maybe there's something you could do with blockchain for the aerospace industry, because what you're talking about, traceability, the integrity of the supply chain, all this could perhaps be addressed by blockchain. So at the time, that was when Bitcoin, if you ask anybody around here, what's Bitcoin or blockchain in 2016, I don't think anybody would have been able to give you an answer. They'd say, what's that? But at the time, Bitcoin was kind of entering one of its big adoption ramp-ups, one of the bigger ones. And I was thinking, well, if Bitcoin has done a digitalization of cash, so created electronic cash, and then the next wave was this crypto where Ethereum and all of these cryptocurrencies were essentially digitalizing fundraising, equities, projects. I thought the third wave, after you go cash and tangible, would be physical assets. And how do we put physical assets on a blockchain? And so it was those conversations I had with some entrepreneurs in Shanghai. Some of them became really big players, by the way, in the blockchain space. But it was from that conversation that I had kind of the epiphany moment where I was like, well, I want to create for the industry a system that uses blockchain to be a database of aircraft parts, engine parts. And instead of just a cryptocurrency balance, we're putting information that would be useful to secure, like the time and cycles, the part number, serial number, and the identity of these assets. So that was essentially how I got the idea, and we launched it in 2017. 2018, we had the founding team together, and the rest is history.
So in those early years, what were some of the obstacles to start getting some momentum with the company? And there's a lot of convincing. Even you even talk about blockchain, and people who are listening today who, they might be sophisticated business people, but they maybe still don't understand quite what it is. How do you overcome some of those? How did you tackle that, especially at the beginning?
Yeah, well, at the beginning, it felt like we were kind of educating the market, like just actually not just even talking about our products and solutions, but helping people have a fundamental understanding of this new technology. How is it being used for cryptocurrencies? How can it be used differently databases and for supply chain purposes. So getting people to differentiate between that was definitely something we spent a lot of time in the early days on. Um, Interestingly, the US, I think, will lead crypto and will lead blockchain in the coming years. But at the time, China, Japan, and Korea, if you looked at it, were the biggest buyers of cryptocurrencies in those years. So I think there might have been a little bit more of an open mind around it there. We were fortunate to get a launch customer early on. On the actually the way we really got started is we had a couple of early POCs. So there were companies like Rolls-Royce, Singapore Airlines, that were running kind of competitions to say, hey, we see that blockchain is going to be changing the industry. We want to look for, make a call for innovative companies that have technology solutions that use blockchain. And so we were able to also build up our own kind of product and the requirements around it by doing some of those in the early stages with OEMs, airlines, and MROs.
So was Rolls-Royce trying to approach it as a from the traceability standpoint, like, hey, we want to track? I mean, again, I think the brilliance of blockchain is you could go all the way back to track the actual billet and where of metal that the blade was made out of, all the way back to what mine it came out of. How aggressive were they, or were they just saying, hey, here's a blue ocean, whatever you want to try, what can you come up with?
It was a bit more of a blue ocean, and they released a whole bunch of problem statements, and I would say actually a lot of them were more from the perspective not of traceability, which is one use case for sure, but with that particular project, it was more about collaboration. How do we build? How do we connect the airline, the MRO that's taking the parts off, the OEM that's maybe providing the data to do a repair, or maybe coordinating those repairs themselves. So it was actually using blockchain to create a common source of truth around what is the status of this transaction, what is the status of this asset. So um, uh, that does plug into traceability, but that wasn't actually where we started on that particular project. It was more about the operational efficiency, the collaboration, which is another big part of blockchain.
So those were those two test cases. Did you guys get, what was their feedback? How did that, how receptive were they? And then what obstacles are they coming up with I mean, maybe they did implement them. I don't know.
Yeah, well, so yeah, we had those early projects with like Etihad, with Sanad, with Rolls-Royce, Singapore, and some others. Uh, right around that time, which was only about a year after we kind of started our product development, we got hit with COVID. So a lot of the people during COVID we had to kind of make sure that um, we could survive through COVID, and then also um, so it did negatively affect those projects in a way in terms of like the people were not there anymore. Like a lot of people got laid off from these companies. And what we were fortunate to do was we got a launch customer who saw what we were doing with those POCs and said, "Hey, we believe in what you're doing. We have a very kind of large business in terms of so this company is part of Japan Airlines Group. It's called Jalux. They're also one of our launch customers in terms of the production platform that Block Aero is today." And that was pretty key to having a nice base of business for us to get started with. Uh, there's hundreds of thousands of assets on chain just as a result of this cooperation, and it really uh, proved to us that we could not just build a conceptually nice blockchain system, but the application around it that is robust enough for like large enterprises to use.
So maybe you can explain to our listeners, that use of blockchain by JLux. How did that improve their business?
So for Jalix specifically, they actually got operational efficiency improvements because they were using it to coordinate thousands of repairs that they have out in the open with different shops, and then they need to get different approvals and eventually like issue their invoices. So if I was to look at it and say what like really improved the best for them, I think it's the time to issue the invoices got shortened significantly. Maybe by weeks, you could say, from what they were looking at before. So we were able to kind of make some of that go a little bit faster for them, and Yeah, that would be like the biggest win for them. Also, just number of man hours in terms of having updated some of their processes to our system, created like basically a much, like something that might have been a bit more manual before became automated. And our system not only uses blockchain to coordinate and synchronize the data. But we also have an open API architecture, so they were able to use that to get like updates from other external data sources into their transactions. So like when you have the airway bills moving around, you might want to pull data from different sources, and it updates that this is where the asset is, or this is where the order is. And so just bringing all those things together on a blockchain, I think, was quite a big win for them operationally.
Nice. I've in a lot of the airline interactions, especially related to engine parts, um, a lot of the airlines, especially legacy airlines, the bigger they are, sometimes the more challenging their processes internally are. But
Yes.
sometimes we'll have back to birth paperwork sitting in a review queue for some quality guy at the airline for weeks and months, and it's the paperwork from our perspective has been reviewed and everything is there is perfect.
Yes.
In a nice pretty packet. It just takes them such a long time to actually get that to the top of their queue, and then sometimes they're starting intellectually from scratch on it. Right, they haven't seen the paperwork before, so
Right.
they're going through that.
What you're describing is fundamentally where I felt the pain when I was doing these
Yeah.
deals with other companies. And what I felt was I'm doing something that somebody else has probably already done as well. And this due diligence, this vetting of the paperwork, this checking of every dot and I, like if somebody does that, but then they encrypt it so that it becomes immutable and I can reuse this work that's been done, I've created now a digital asset. A digital asset of aviation data. And those digital assets are kind of twins to the physical asset. And that's what Block Aero is doing. We're creating a chain of custody solution for every asset manager in our industry to be able to go either as a member of Block Aero and manage and issue data, or as a member of the industry and without being on Block Aero, go and validate that the data that you've received is accurate, it's authentic. And really that's kind of the latest and greatest for Block Aero. What we're working on is a lot more around this space too.
Yeah, it's we've got one particular customer who we had to create a portal for our contract, so that at each step where that in the portal, it's sort of a yes/no decision, and again, it's the paperwork lands, and the quality guy says it passed quality review, and we can look at the subset, but it's a very rudimentary system. It's simple, it's functional,
Yep.
but now the manager at the airline can look. I have 12 items waiting for my quality guy to approve it. What's going on here? And these aren't even LOPs. These are
Right.
simple documentation trains. And so, is that a case study? Is like what you did with JLux? Is that a little bit what they're doing? Say, hey, all right, we get to this gate. This is in this queue, and waiting for this approval. Once it's approved, and I assume you guys are part of that software solution that you're pairing together there.
Exactly. So for the Jalix case, indeed, it brought visibility up to all of those type of items and made them very clear and basically indisputable between the customer and themselves, right? So that was definitely the one use case. We've got another one with like for the portal. So actually, we've got this partnership with an organization called Aircraft Fleet Recycling Association.
Yep.
They're ASA, sister organization, and we've developed a kind of portal for them to, in partnership also with the Chinese, so they're running a pilot on this right now, to give access for all removed parts that have been removed in accordance with that standard and have a certain kind of checklist of key data points and documents that need to go along with it, like a removal tag or like the time cycle data, or photos of the data plate. So there's a kind of standardized package that is now created for all as removed parts, and you can go to the AFRA portal that connects to our blockchain, and you can see has this part been through does it check those compliance boxes that I need in order to sell into this market.
We'll continue this discussion on the next episode of Nose to Tail, a podcast presented by Jet Midwest. Don't forget to please like and subscribe to our channel.